You're listening to Win-Win, an entrepreneurial community with your host, Ben Wolf.
And welcome to the Win-Win Podcast, the official podcast of Wolf's Edge Integrators. I'm joined by my guest today, Kevin Mayo, and we're going to talk about the interplay of having a fractional COO, number two leader or integrator working together with a fractional CFO or CIO or CTO. That's what we're going to talk about today. A lot of topics related to that. And with that, I want to get into introducing our guest today. Kevin Mayo is a partner at Fintech Partners. They provide fractional CFO, CIO, and CTO work and funding for startups, small and mid-sized companies in multiple industries. Welcome, Kevin.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be my first official podcast.
All right. Well, then we are very, very lucky. But I would just ask you before we get into a conversation, is if you could just give us like a 1 or 2 minute background on Kevin Mayo, where you came from, and how you got to be doing what you're doing now.
Okay. So I guess I started in the wonderful world of public accounting, working for, I guess, Arthur Young first, and then Ernst & Young after the merger. And so public accounting is the wonderful world of auditing and tax work with some of the largest corporations in the world. So there are, at the time, there was 8 auditing firms that were larger than any other firm. So I guess before that, undergraduate in accounting, and then went to work in public accounting, did that for a couple years, and then went in the world of corporate accounting, and then launched my career, I guess, and worked up through the ranks. Started as accounting supervisor, then became like a retail controller, and then went back and was in the finance world for a while with Kraft Foods as a senior financial analyst. And then actually I implemented IT systems for a couple years, and then worked up accounting manager, then director, and then ultimately to CFO. Worked with large companies, small companies. So I was a CFO for a biochemical startup. And I was also then head of finance, I guess, and accounting at Terex, the aerial work platforms division, which was a $2 billion business. Ultimately, as I said, became a CFO, had spent time as a CIO, and had a chance to work with all kinds of clients. So from airplanes to fast food to regular food to all kinds of manufacturing type clients, which is kind of my sweet spot. So done all those things, and then ultimately decided to put my own shingle up, and with the business partner out of Las Vegas, and now we are fractional CFOs, CIOs, and CTOs. So I do all those things. My partner is stronger, I'd say, on the IT side, but I love that side just as well. But in the end, it's all about helping businesses make more money, be more organized. And my latest thing is bringing joy. So it's really understanding some of the challenges, say, the finance people have, helping them be more confident in themselves, helping them understand their roles, and then helping them be integrated into the organization. Sometimes the accounting people are off to the side, the finance people are off to the side. It's being part of the organization, finding their voice, and then, taking it from where they might frown to where they smile, which is probably the most rewarding part of the whole business. Certainly making businesses stronger is rewarding because there's a whole group then that can be happier, but working with the finance team and then sometimes the IT teams and bringing some joy is wonderful.
Oh, that's beautiful. And one of the things I think that for the listeners and viewers of Win-Win, they can appreciate is that you have worked as a fractional CFO in a number of clients together with Wolf's Edge integrators, particularly with Joanne Giordano, with Thomas Hoover from our team, with Kyle Mealy, our CRO. And can you talk for a minute here? Like, what is it like, right? You've got at least 2, if not more, executives on a leadership team driving the business toward a better future that are fractional, that are not actually full-time employees in the business. What is it like? I guess, like, what is it like coming in as a fractional CFO? What is it like working with a COO who's also fractional? Like, what is that like? How does that interplay work?
Well, it's pretty fascinating. In the beginning, I found it scary. I found it scary to be a fractional CFO because I'm not there day by day, and I'm not on site in a lot of cases. working with them. But what I've found is that this model, the EOS model, that is essential to working with your integrators and with the businesses, allows it to be okay. So the model is comprehensive and easy to understand and hard to understand. But the easy to understand part is you can get the principles, and the whole organization can understand the principles. It's not just the executives, it drives down into the whole organization as you find meetings at the lower levels which tie into the higher levels. And so this is comprehensive, it's this comprehensive strategy. There's also a personal part of it. In the beginning of the meeting, we asked the question, what successes did you have personally and what successes did you have professionally? And in the beginning, I scratched my head a little bit on that one too. But I found as the weeks went forward that people said meaningful things. And so what this allows is, even though you're fractional and truly part-time, you become part of the family. And wow, that's way overused in today's world. But I guess I'm here to tell you that I was skeptical somewhat in the beginning, but I've seen it really happen. And it's had a massive impact for me. And it allows that fractional CFO and CIO to connect along with the business model, this comprehensive business model, which makes it really helpful to organization. And then an organization doesn't have to spend the money on a full-time COO or a full-time CFO that they really can't afford. So it ends up being effective time that's spent with them. You become part of the organization and you have a framework to work within. So it's wonderful, even though I was a skeptic in the beginning.
That's really cool. What is the difference that you see? Because, when I asked you about how a COO works with a CFO, and they work fractionally, both of them, and also just fractionally with the business, and you right away went in your answer to talking about the EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System model, or
Yes.
business operating framework for businesses. And what is the difference between coming in as a fractional CFO or CIO, CTO, if a company is using a cohesive business operating system like EOS versus if they're not? Like, what is the difference?
With the EOS, there's a defined plan. So first of all, there's an open discussion about what are the issues in the business, the main issues that need to be addressed. And those issues seem to be categorized and prioritized. And then there's a comprehensive plan to address those issues. And then it's about executing that plan. But the EOS system allows you to focus on with this comprehensive plan that's put together, focus on certain components on a weekly basis that builds up to the quarterly, which builds up to the annual. So that comprehensive plan is really what allows it all to execute, because then again, the whole organization is focusing on that plan and moving forward with that plan. And you're able to see the progress associated, you're able to bring up issues associated with it and resolve those issues in real time. And it seems to be all on kind of a weekly basis. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that
Right.
comprehensive plan and then the execution of the whole organization related to that plan, I think allows that to occur.
Now, I want to understand the more financial and data focused part of that implementation. Right.
Okay.
So I know with some of our clients that we've worked on together, others that you work on separately, I guess I want people to have an understanding of, like, what are things typically like before you come into a business, and then what are they like afterwards? Like, what are you
Okay.
doing, and what difference does it make?
Okay. So when I go into a business, normally there are issues that aren't being addressed. And there's not a comprehensive strategy, or there is a comprehensive strategy and it's in the CEO's mind. And maybe it's in the executive team's mind, but oftentimes the CEO, the head of finance, the head of IT, the head of manufacturing, all their ideas of what they're doing are different. And what I see is the first of all the alignment of those issues. So I have a client now, a manufacturing client, which I'm working um, with your team, and the each CEO had an idea of what he wanted, how he wanted to go forward, and what he wanted to manufacture. The sales team had what they were selling. The manufacturing team had what they were building, and the engineer team had what they were designing. But all four of those things were different. So the manufacturing team wanted to have productivity, so they were running their different production lines and building, unfortunately, stuff to inventory. And the sales team was selling stuff that the manufacturing team wasn't building, and in some cases, the engineering team couldn't design. And the CEO was saying, well, I have a problem and things don't seem to be doing well. So then he clamped down on inventory. So then the manufacturing team had too many people and weren't necessarily even producing at this point. But then the sales team still wasn't talking to, it was a utter mess. The teams weren't talking to each other. It's not that they didn't like each other. This is actually a very positive company with a positive environment. They just never got in the same room. So I brought them together in the same room, and EOS gave us kind of a structure to, again, set goals and then go in the same direction. But what I find oftentimes is even if you have a positive environment, the teams just don't talk to each other. And then I'm passionate about what I do, but I'm also very straightforward and say, okay, so John doesn't talk to Jane, who doesn't talk to Mary, who doesn't talk to Ralph. I connect 2 people, then 3 people, then ultimately I get them all connected. And I do it with this nice, calm manner. So I'm not ranting and raving. I'm just saying, hey guys, maybe we should do this. Or, wow, if we have a production meeting where we're talking about what we're going to produce for the next 2 months, why don't we invite the sales team? Because the sales team is going to sell what we're going to produce. And this is a real example that we created then an operational meeting where everybody gets together now. Unfortunately, it's a monthly basis. I think it should be every 2 weeks, but on a monthly basis, we at least have them all talking. So when I enter an organization, I often find times people are really motivated and they love their jobs, but they're just not having conversation. I had a boss once that told me every issue in an organization comes down to communication. I don't believe that necessarily, but it's amazing how many times that communication is a huge issue. And I just get people to talk. I talk to them and I get them to talk to each other. And EOS is a nice framework to put all that together so everybody's rowing in the same direction. I don't know if that answers your
Some
question, but
people,
that's
well,
kind of what I see.
no, it's a very nice answer, and you do have a very soothing voice. So, but
Thank you.
what some people watching or listening to this might be feeling when they heard what you just said, they might be thinking, wait a second, what does what you just described have to do with the CFO?
I think the
Help
CFO
them
had,
understand the
okay.
mental bridge that is going on here. What are we missing? Because I want people's eyes to be opened, like to see like what's possible bringing in, because people think of accounting within their business as just somebody to manage the money, do AR, AP, payroll, bookkeeping, and maybe a controller, just accounting operations. That's really what they think of. And maybe somebody to
Okay.
send me reports, somebody who could put together and send me reports. Now, if they knew what to even do with those reports, separate question. But that's what people usually think of. And so I want people's minds to be opened of a executive CFO. Like that's a completely different thing than your controller or your accounting department. I mean, obviously that's under that. It depends on information from there, but help us understand, bridge the gap for those who don't understand why you're talking about cohesion between departments and everything. What does that have to do with the CFO? I want people to understand the value of like what someone like a Kevin Mayo or a fractional CFO is doing in a business. What do they
Okay.
get from it? What happens differently?
So first of all, I love numbers. And that's kind of what brought me to what I'm doing and how I came up, I guess, through the ranks to become a CFO. And so I think one of the primary responsibilities is what you just said, right? It's making sure that the numbers make sense and making sure that you get the reports for the organization. And I would say people like me, our expertise is finance. And I actually have somewhat of an expertise in the IT world as well. So that's kind of what I understand I'm the expert of. But I think a true CFO, or at least the way I like to be a CFO, has a unique view of the business. We see all the different components. We've been trained in all the different components, whether it's sales, it's manufacturing, it's distribution. And then so we have this unique view of the business because we've been analyzing businesses over time to understand just enough to be able to speak the language of the different parts of the business. I also believe in, and you probably noticed I use smaller words. And I believe as you get, you're discussing or explaining financial concepts, that it should be in easy to understand words. It should be in the language of whoever's listening. And I think that's important. I think I need to put okay on record here. That's important. But in doing so, I build these relationships throughout the business, and then I'm able to bring the business partners together. So I think with that unique view and understanding of the business, you have a unique ability to help explain different parts of the business to different parts. So sales and manufacturing speak different languages, but you can bring them together and have a common language between them and facilitate that common language. So over time, I love to talk and work with people. So I like to bring people together. And I think that's a key part of being the CFO. And you can do it with numbers, you can do it with their language and bring it together. So again, I guess in sum, the experience of working with the different departments, and I've had some fantastic mentors to help me learn shipping, learn manufacturing, learn these different things. I can then understand the language, help translate and bring people together. And I find that a critical part of being a CFO. And you can do it without, emotion and passion. And as you come in as a fractional, you don't have the history of, what happened 15 years ago and how this person maybe made you upset or didn't do what you wanted them to. I'm like, okay, guys, let's help make this business successful and achieve the goals that have been set about for this business. But a fundamental part of what I do is I do bring those parties together because I've had these wonderful mentors to teach me, and I've been lucky enough to understand all these different parts of the business. So I just bring the people together. And I think it's critical because if it's if you're in a situation where you see those things haven't happened, then the CEO has not been able to do that, probably because he or she has been so busy doing other things. So you can provide that service for them. So to your point, it may be a little different than what people think of, but think of the fact that the finance people have this perspective of the entire business. They've been trained in all the different pieces, which is unique. Usually, if you're in manufacturing, you've only been trained in manufacturing. If you're in purchasing, you've been trained in purchasing. In sales, you're this fantastic salesperson, but you haven't seen the other parts of the business. So it's hard to come together. And finance people or CFOs have that unique view of the business and have those relationships across the business to be able to bring people together.
Is it fair to say, to your point now, that what is the unique capacity that the CFO, a great CFO, will have in bringing all the parts of the business together is because of data? Because the CFO is the one who's really understands and has to understand for it to work. Like, you can't make a report if you don't have data, if it's not accurate data, if you're not measuring meaningful things that actually make a difference, that move the needle. And so, because you must understand and use and produce data, so that inherently gets you involved in all the different parts of the business. And you can't be successful in doing that unless you get all the different parts to work together. Is that a fair way to reconstruct what you just said, or am I missing something?
That's a fantastic way to reconstruct what I just said. And I've never thought about it that way, but you're right. That's where it all started.
So it's data.
I said for a while, I implemented ERP systems, and that's when I really began to dig into the data from the different groups and also
Right.
understand how that data is created at the same time, because we went all the way down to understand how to basically build a system down to parameters. But you're right, there's all these different data sets that came together. And that was the first real inkling into the other parts of the business, and being able to talk to people about that data
Right.
was
That's what
important. So talk
forces
to
it together.
manufacturing. Yeah, I never thought about that. So yes, that's a great way to describe it. And for me, it all started with manufacturing. I was in a $30 million revenue manufacturing company as an accounting manager, and there was problems with our data. So I sat down and had long conversations with the vice president of manufacturing and began teaching me how to read his data and teaching me his whole model. And that was when I was in my early 20s. So I was incredibly fortunate to go through that example. But then it split to, there was a global sourcing guy for a $2 billion revenue company I was working for who taught me all about sourcing. And then it kind of went to all the different pieces. But you're right, it was originally the data, but then I was lucky enough to learn about how do you source for a $2 billion organization.
Right.
So, for example. But no, I never thought
Let me
about it that way.
understand for the people. Awesome. So let me understand from the people again watching, listening to this, of decision making.
Okay.
Because when a leadership team or an owner has to make decisions, should we hire? Should we not hire? How many should we hire? Should we invest in this? Should we invest in that? Should we invest in this marketing or this
Okay.
product line or whatever, this piece of capital equipment, whatever it is? All kind of decisions need to be made all the time. Most of the time, even if people have a controller and, when you have some data there at a basic level, just for operational level, decision making is, what does my gut tell me about how much money is going to come in the door, how much we may grow or may not grow? What does my gut tell me about, uh, when I look at the bank balance that's in the bank account right now? And that's how decision making is made. And I kind of liken that. That's a lot of business owners. They make most decisions that way.
Okay.
And our what I, as a business owner of Wolf's Edge Integrators, right, am also in that situation. And what I feel like, if it would be that way, and when it was that way, is like I feel like I'm flying blind. I'm like flying in an airplane through a cloudy environment. I can't see.
Okay.
Is there a mountain coming up? Is there like like where am I? It's like, I can't even fly by instruments. I mean, I'm not a pilot, so I don't know about these things, but I know that you can fly by instruments if it's at night or something, right? And so, how does a CFO help people make decisions and not be like they're flying blind?
Okay. So I think the most, maybe the first thing is to understand what is the company trying to accomplish. So if you say EOS, what is your business model? What are your goals associated with a given quarter and year? Is that seems to be the main thing the model focuses on. And so decisions shouldn't be random. Decisions should support what the goal is in a given quarter and a given year. So I think having that business framework and having that plan, if you will, is the first part. Because then you make decisions that support that plan. They're not in a vacuum, they're not one off. So if you're going to hire someone, you're hiring someone to achieve those goals that you're trying to achieve on a quarterly and annual basis. So I think having a plan for, it's a budget explained from a number perspective, but having a plan for a given quarter and year is the first part. And then the decisions support that plan and it supports the individual objectives. So let's take an annual plan down to a quarterly plan down to you're trying to achieve this given month. Again, supporting the annual plans, those decisions need to support that what you're trying to achieve that month. So again, if you need more people to achieve the sales or achieve production, then you make sure that you're hiring a person to support that, and you do some kind of return on an ROI analysis of having that hiring that particular person. So for one of the companies I work for, I just built an ROI calculator to hire people. So we make sure that as that person gets hired, that it supports the financials, which support what's going to happen that month, that quarter, that year. So the way it's not so cloudy is your decisions are supporting that plan. And so it's important to have that plan so that you can have the decisions associated with it. And you can do things like make ROI calculators. You could look at the value of a given decision in an organization, and you don't necessarily have to make a calculator. You just look at if logically it's going to support, again, that monthly, that quarterly, that annual plan. So I think that's how I wipe away the clouds is, what is this doing for the business? Is it building into your plan? And of course, you can change plans if you need to, but then that's a formal thing. And then again, the decisions support that. So I guess to answer your question, from my perspective, it's all about what is the plan and how does this particular decision fit into that plan? And then having those meetings in the EOS world where you're talking on a weekly basis and you're identifying what the issues are. And then you have the quarterly where you really come together and kind of finagle what your plan is. That really supports that. So you're talking to the entire business on a weekly basis. And so those decisions don't come out of the blue because you've had this up-to-date discussion about the issues associated with the business. And you have individual targets on a weekly basis that you're either making or not making. So you see how that all stacks together? If you're meeting weekly, then there shouldn't be a surprise on decision.
Right. Yeah, no, that's awesome. And one of the things that we do is we have at Wolf's Edge Integrators, just talking openly, is we have a 12-month budget. And so we're looking forward. And if we're saying like, hey, can we add an additional, Vistage Summit sponsorship this year for in our marketing budget? Or can we add an additional EOS Great Boss Workshop sponsorship somewhere in the year? Or can we add a salesperson who's not Ben Wolf at some point? Well, we're plugging. Okay, well, let's plug it into the budget. Let's see what it says. Let's see what happens. Does our cash get too low? Does it start going down? how is how does our marketing spend ratio looking, ROAS? Like, well, I have all these things that we could look at to give us some clarity. So I definitely, just to echo what you're saying. Um, One of the things, speaking of Wolf's Edge integrators with our team, before we started recording, you were talking about, and I guess I'd like for you to share for those out there. You said what it's like working with a fractional COO, as coming in as the fractional CFO or CIO, CTO. What's it like coming in working with a fractional COO from Wolf's Edge integrators? What's that like for you?
Um, First of all, I had a chance to work with Joanne in the past, so I've gotten to know her and I respect her and I loved working for her. I loved working with her, and so I see it as I can't
And
remember
she loves
exactly what
working with you,
okay, okay. And also I
recommends you in every
okay,
possible circumstance.
and while I'm saying it, I also really enjoyed working with Thomas because we had a challenging client, and so that brings you closer together. So I want to give Thomas some love too, and then of course I also like working with Kyle, but that said, I don't remember exactly what I said before the call, but and I'm drawing a complete blank here.
I can
But
speak from the heart. You don't have to remember.
it's an so the EOS model I think gives us the ability to have an integrated approach. And so trying to think of what I said, but that said, so it gives us a framework to begin to work with. And I think what I probably said is it there's a different part to this model, and it's a personal part. And I think I said before that in the beginning you have to say what was a personal success, what was a business success, and different clients do that different ways. But you begin to build this relationship with a business. And again, I kind of scratch my head and say, yeah, really, if you say something personal, but personal, it doesn't really make a difference. And I think the answer is yes. In the end, if you watch after week after week after week, you see people begin to bring themselves to the business, and you get to know the people. And so in the business and what they really think and what they think about the business and personal things about themselves. So as a result of that, you're able, even though you're fractional, you're able to actually build these true relationships. And then I just see a nice natural connection between the operational side and where we're trying to go, and then the financial side and the overall business side. So even though we're fractional, we're able to make this connection because of the way the plan is set overall, and the way we talk on a weekly basis, and the way it becomes personal. Um, you're able to be effective from a CFO and a COO side. And with Joanne, for example, we find we're often or almost always in lockstep on what we're trying to achieve with the business. And it's not just, and I guess big theme of this is not just the numbers, it's what's the welfare of the business. What's, are people happy? Are people fulfilled in what they're doing? And we're able to achieve that by this personal aspect, by having a plan and then achieving that plan. Sometimes the accountants will get a piece of paper, right? They have their things to do today, and they're so happy to check something off. Well, I think sometimes that's physical and sometimes that's mental. As you're achieving this plan, your CFO and COO is leading the business. Your CFO is translating it from a numbers perspective, but then also helping bring everybody together. You're just able to have this massive impact on a business. And I don't know if that
That's
was the best
satisfying.
answer in the world, but
Yeah, no, that's
it's it,
satisfying.
it's it's good to have people check these things off a list and mentally check them off as they're being successful. And as the COO is running the business, CFO is helping with the numbers. We're helping them focus on these things in a plan to be successful.
Right. And so I guess one thing I take away from what you're saying is that the COO or integrator is responsible for the total execution of the business,
Yeah.
right? Of the business
Yes.
plan and of the team. And the CFO is it's not just financial numbers. It's not just dollars and
Yeah.
cents. It's all kinds of data that tie into those numbers and that drive those numbers. There's all kinds of data, whether it comes from marketing or manufacturing or supply chain or sales or whatever it is, but there's data that's all throughout the business and that ties everything together and has to be tied together by someone who knows how to tie it and knows how to make it talk to, how to make it meaningful and not meaningless and just a bunch of random numbers. And so that also ties in and ties together the entire business. So
Yeah.
it's
So
really a match made in heaven.
if I focus on the data, it's about spending time with those individuals, understanding what they're trying to achieve and what they're trying to say, and then translating it into numbers. that they understand and the whole business understands. I mean, it's an
Mhm.
art form, right? So you can sit down with a sales individual and say, okay, what are you really trying to achieve? And then say with the Kyle. So then I work with, and Kyle is the head of sales for one of the businesses I work with. It's then translating his needs and his thoughts, to your point, into numbers, and then sharing that with the rest of the organization, or helping him share it with the rest of the organization, which is the best case scenario.
Right.
So I talked about different people, different groups not talking to each other. One of the issues is sometimes the language is different. And so I try to use the language of numbers to bring people together as well. And numbers that they understand, right? So there's no, I guess I'm an aspiring writer. And you have all these books behind me, and I'm not doing well in being an aspiring writer. But one of the most important things I learned is that it's not what you write, it's what the reader reads and what the reader understands. So
Mhm.
you can write all kinds of things, but if the reader
Mhm.
doesn't understand the message you're trying to share, you're not really communicating, in my opinion.
Right.
So I take this with different groups, sales versus manufacturing, and I take it into numbers and say, we have to communicate. And so sales, yeah, you've got these wonderful ratios and different things you say, but if manufacturing doesn't understand what you're saying, we're not communicating. And so
Right.
I try to be that bridge to help that communication with data. And data is the most wonderful thing in the world, because data doesn't lie. Data is data. And so I try to help it so the different groups understand the data the same way. And then thus they're able to communicate. And you find out that sales can communicate with manufacturing, communicate with engineering, communicate with the CEO of a business. And we're all speaking the same language. And we're all looking at the same numbers. And it's beautiful.
Right. Beautiful. Look, people can look up Kevin Mayo and his firm, Fintech Partners, online. We're going to share that link in the description and in the social media. And I appreciate you sharing this and seeing how fractional COOs and fractional CFOs and others can work together and help business owners get where they want to go, so that hopefully business owners who are listening to or watching this can kind of see, oh, that's where it fits in. That's what it means. That's what it looks like. So I'm hoping that people come away with that higher level of understanding on those topics. And Kevin, I appreciate you making the time to talk today.
All right. Well, thank you very much for having me on my first official podcast. And so I guess just thank you.
No problem. Hope it was a good experience. And everybody else, we'll see you on the other side. Thank you.
You're listening to Win Win, an entrepreneurial community with your host, Ben Wolf.